This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Thursday Night Football. The countdown is on. We are under 2 hours from Thursday Night Football. You can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. I know it's the Browns. I know it's the Bengals. But there's nothing better than seeing a dumpster fire like the Battle of Ohio between two number one overall picks, two former Heisman Trophy winners. It's a lot of juice for this game tonight, in my opinion. And there's a lot of juice for fantasy football people as well, because we got Andy McNamara coming on at 6:15 to get into your fantasy football needs, lineups, and more. We know that fantasy football never sleeps no matter what the Thursday football matchup is. And, a week like this with no Michael Thomas, he's going to be out. We know that Marlon Mack, he's done for the year. There's a lot of needs you people have out there for fantasy football. We'll get into all that and more coming up with Andy McNamara from Sportsnet at 6:15. The PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. We'll also get into the latest news from college football. The MAC is following the Big Ten. We didn't get into the college football stuff yesterday. We'll get into it a little bit later in the show today. Eagles news, you can check it out right now on 97.3ESPN.com. I'll give you the quick summary of the information. For more details on the full Eagles injury report, you can go to 97.3ESPN.com. On the injury report, a couple notes to bring you up to date on right now at the top of the show. Lane Johnson, limited at practice today, was a full participant yesterday. Now, Lane spoke to the media today, and he explained to them, this was the big news for today. The reason why he had the surgery was he retore an ankle ligament during the scrimmage at the link, and he had to have it fixed. Now, he says he will not be 100% for this Sunday, but he can play. Now, if you were listening to the Sports Bash a little bit earlier, so less than 2 hours from right now, but previously, NFL insider Adam Kaplan explained to Mike Gill on the Sports Bash that it was torn scar tissue. Now, that's important to remember because it's the same ankle that Lane Johnson has injured before. And whether you are an athlete, whether you are not an athlete, anytime you've injured any part of your body multiple times, you've had re-injuries of a same part of your body, you have a pain tolerance threshold that maybe is a little irrational. So you have to think that the Eagles doctors were protecting Lane from himself in some ways, because this is the same ankle he has injured multiple times. Adam Kaplan said, it's the same ankle he had a high ankle sprain on last year. And anytime you have torn scar tissue, it's necessary to have a cleanup, whether it's a knee, an ankle, any part of the body that has any sort of mobility, shoulder, whatever it may be. So now at least we have a lot more information for why Lane has been out, what the issue is, and where we are right now. So that was a lot of great clarity that came in just the last few hours. Again, you can check out all the information at 97.3ESPN.com. Again, Lane Johnson told the media today he retore an ankle ligament in the scrimmage at the link. And NFL insider Adam Kaplan was on Football at 4 with Mike Gill and Hunter Birdie just about under 2 hours ago, and explained that it was torn scar tissue in the same ankle that he had a high ankle sprain last season. So we know a lot more about Lane Johnson's situation. I wouldn't read too much into the limited today versus full yesterday. Listen, part of that might have been just he wasn't fully ready to go full board today. Maybe part of it was because he knew he had to talk to the media today, and they weren't going to ask him to do as many drills, so he wouldn't have as much time to deal with the rehab and the doctors and the ice baths and all that after practice. So, full list of the Eagles injury report right now at 97.3ESPN.com. You can check out more information about Lane Johnson, also Brandon Graham's status as well on the website, as well as Derek Barnett and others, all up there right now at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app. And as I told you all yesterday, having Lane Johnson back for this Sunday is huge. Even if he's not 100%, you need stability on the offensive line. You need to have a bounce back. You need some positivity. And it looks like right now that Lane Johnson and Miles Sanders, two of arguably the most important players on this offense, are on track to return this Sunday. Big news for the Philadelphia Eagles. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We talk about fantasy football and the NFL Week 2 coming up with Andy McNamara of Sportsnet. You can send in your fantasy football questions, 609-403-0973, or you can hit us up on Twitter with the hashtag AskAndy to @973ESPN or @JoshHennig on Twitter. Again, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. I also want to hit on a little bit other news that is coming up, of course, tonight. There's a lot of sports going on, but one of those sports is the Philadelphia Phillies. And remember I was telling you all last night about Mickey Moniak and how it's put up or shut up time? I feel like I must have spoke something into existence, because guess who is starting in left field? That's right, none other than Mickey Moniak. This is probably the most topsy-turvy lineup of the Phillies season. McCutchen's the DH, Moniak is in left, Hazley in center, Harper's back in right field. JT Realmuto is still out. You got Andrew Knapp behind the plate. Alec Bohm is at third. Phil Gosselin's at first. I mean, there's going to be some errors tonight, right? I'm assuming there's going to be errors for the Phillies tonight. But Mickey Moniak in left field. I said it yesterday. It's put up or shut up time. Well, this kid better come out there and make some contact. And if not, we're all going to be ripping him from here to Kingdom Come and ripping this front office, because at some point, we got to hold the Eagles front office accountable. Matt Klentak and his group up there, I got to be honest with you, I'm not a big believer in what they're doing. I'm not a big believer in how they've gotten to this point. I think they've been a little bit lucky. I think that they've been a little bit fortunate with certain things, but they've gotten more things wrong than they've gotten right. And at some point, someone's got to be held accountable. This is a season where every team can make the playoffs, right? Every team with a decent roster can make the playoffs. The Philadelphia Phillies don't make the playoffs. There needs to be someone having to take the fall for that. And to me, it's not Girardi. He just got there. And you can't blame it all on the players, because you look at the Phillies, the majority of the team, the hitters, they're doing their job. The majority of the team is doing their job, guys like Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler and others. But you send out an abomination of a bullpen this year. Even after the trade acquisitions, they've still had some troubles out there. You didn't put together the best pitching staff in general. And last time I checked, you can't win without pitching, right? You need somebody to throw the ball and get outs and all that stuff. Yeah, you need pitching. This team is just so frustrating to me. I can't with this team anymore. The good thing there's football on. There's good thing there's NBA playoffs on, because this Phillies team makes me want to just throw the remote or throw my phone across a room all the time. I don't even have the energy to tweet how angry I am with the Phillies sometimes, because let's be realistic, I'm just wasting my time trying to find the right words to say. Injuries happen. I'm not holding that against the Phillies, whether it's what happened with Rhys Hoskins' elbow or whatever. But this bullpen, there's no excuse, except that Matt Klentak has done a poor job in Philadelphia. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up next, we got Andy McNamara from Sportsnet Talk NFL Week 2 Fantasy Football and more. Game Night being brought to you by SHM Financial. Are you quickly approaching or are you currently in retirement? Don't get overwhelmed. Contact SHM Financial. Give them a call at 800-MONEY-SHM or visit them online at shmfinancial.com. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Techsport is open. The place, sugarhouse.com. Techsport is open, 609-403-0973. Joining us as promised on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. NFL Week 2 is upon us. Of course, Thursday football right here on 97.3 ESPN. Browns, Bengals, the Battle of Ohio is tonight. The battle of Heisman Trophy winners, number 1 overall picks. Also, we got to talk about fantasy football picks, moves. What should you or shouldn't you do? As usual, Andy McNamara joins us each and every week to talk more about fantasy football, NFL, and more. Of course, he is the Sportsnet National Fantasy Sports host, analyst, writer, NFL analyst, and more. And he joins us now on Game Night. Andy, how you doing today?
Oh, Josh, I'm excited, man. It's Thursday Night Football. We made it through Week 1, people. We did it. And now it's on to the rest of the year. Let's go.
Right. Now it's on to the rest of the year. And because of that, that leaves us with some very frustrating questions for people. I got to start with you off the very top. A couple of serious injuries, major impacts. Let's start with the running back, Marlon Mack, out for the year. Obviously, that changes what people should do, not just with the Colts backfield, but also their options in fantasy football in general, because I got the feeling that a lot of people invested high picks in this guy.
Well, and that's the thing. If you didn't own Mac and you were a Jonathan Taylor owner, this is a good thing. Now, we never want anyone to get hurt, of course, right? That's obvious. But from a fantasy football side, what you look at it is, okay, Jonathan Taylor was going to be splitting carries with Mac it was tough, maybe half the year until it became more comfortable. Well, now he is clearly, Frank Reich has said, he's the guy. He's the starter. And then Nyheim Hines. Now, I don't know if it's a bit of luck or whatever, but I picked up Nyheim Hines before Week 1. So I have him on my roster. For my Sportsnet waiver wire pickup article that's out every Tuesday, I put him as the top pickup. Like, if you had an auction dollars, top waiver priority, go get him, because Phil Rivers looked his way often, and now he's going to do it even more so. So, like, Hines, at least it clarifies, I think, more so the role, and it's less of a committee situation than you had when Mac was there.
I also know with the Colts, a guy like Paris Campbell is a hot pickup on the fantasy waiver wire right now. What do you project for his role? Because he got a lot of touches in that game versus the Jags.
He did, and for Campbell, and I think it's going to still be a little bit till we figure out what Phil Rivers likes in this offense. Who does he favor? Is there any trends that start developing? I still think I'm still bullish on Jack Doyle, even though he didn't look his way a lot, the tight end. I still think his workload is going to go up. He went to Campbell quite a bit. And Campbell, if he can stay healthy, remember, it wasn't that long ago in the draft and the combine, speedy guy out of Ohio State, pop him in the slot, right? T.Y. Hilton's had trouble staying healthy. He's zippy down the field as well. So I think for Paris Campbell, that is somebody you definitely want to be looking at, even for bench depth. And what I tell people too, Josh, is even if, let's say, you don't need a wide receiver. You don't need a Paris Campbell on your roster. As long as you're not dropping anybody, if you have an extra, pick somebody like that up, because somebody else in your league does need him, and that could be trade bait for you. So always look to acquire assets, because you never know when an injury is going to hit or when you can get some trade bait there. So you look at him if you could get him on waivers, sure, for like your DraftKings line for DFS, he's $4,500, right? Like, boy, that's looking pretty sweet when you have a guy who had 14 fantasy points in DFS last week. So I think as far as a value play for DraftKings and in season long, he's worth a pickup.
Also, the other big injury also is Michael Thomas, a
Ooh.
guy that a lot of people took it either in the first or second round, depending on how deep your draft is, how deep your fantasy group is with your league. Now we know Emmanuel Sanders is on the team, but is the option really Emmanuel Sanders, or is it to find some other value elsewhere?
So this is my thing. I've thought a lot about this one because obviously there's no replacing Michael Thomas. The guy's the elite of the elite. But what you have to think of is, okay, a lot of focus, a lot of targets go the way of Michael Thomas. How do those now get distributed? And so a guy I put, again, in my waiver wire article, Josh, was Traquan Smith. People go into Emmanuel Sanders. And Alvin Kamara is going to pick up a lot of work. I think Jared Cook's going to pick up a lot of work. Sanders will probably get a little bit of an uptick as well. But Traquan Smith, body size-wise, usage-wise, 6'2", 212. Michael Thomas is 6'3" and about 215. Similar body type. So you have to look at how Michael Thomas was used and who might be able to help fill that role in those types of situations. So Traquan Smith, it's a flyer. It's a bit of a risk. Like, I'm fine putting him in a DraftKings contest. I picked him up in one of my leagues, and I'm debating starting him myself because he could go off, or Drew Brees could go away, but at least you can see there's like a roadmap to how he could go and how useful he could be. So Traquan Smith for the Saints in-house is a really good option.
Another receiver I want to touch on with you before we get to any questions. I know I got a couple here on the text board at 609-403-0973. A couple names we're hearing out there. A guy like LaMichael P. Ryan, he's getting a lot of praise. He was limited at practice. We also know that some of these guys with the Jets, though, it is the Jets. Le'Veon Bell, he said, I'm not injured. He gets put on the IL. So can we really trust anything that comes out of New York?
No. I hate the Jets running game situation for fantasy football anyway. And it's not Le'Veon, even when Le'Veon Bell is healthy, it's not Le'Veon Bell's fault because Adam Gase is a terrible head coach. Yeah, I think he's going to be fired after this year. I think he's going to be gone. So I wouldn't trust that. I wouldn't trust P. Ryan even if he was healthy. Who knows with Adam Gase? That team's a mess. That team needs a total reboot. It needs a new identity. Gase is still cashing checks off of Peyton Manning being his own offensive coordinator. I hate it, and I feel bad for Jets fans and fantasy owners of that team because you never get proper usage out of the running back. So no, I'm not interested in that because even when there is a true bell cow like Le'Veon Bell, he's not being used properly.
Another guy that's very interesting to me is Brandon Ayuk, the rookie out in San Francisco, because they brought in Mohamed Sanu. We know how familiar Sanu is with Kyle Shanahan's offense. They worked together previously. But Ayuk, they drafted him for a reason. He's a full participant at practice this week. So if you're someone looking for value, are you going Ayuk or are you going Sanu this week in fantasy football?
Boy, and listen, what you said, Josh, is true, because for Brandon Ayuk, this is a guy who they traded up for. So you have to follow the dollars, too, free agent dollars and draft capital. They just stay put. They traded up to go get him, Kyle Shanahan. That means they like him. He talked him up big time. So the hamstring's back. So now we got to think with Ayuk. He's a rookie. He's got a hamstring. He's missed time. Is this the week? I'm bullish on him long term, but also Mohamed Sanu. Okay, it's the offense. Is he going to handle a full workload, a full slate? Boy, Josh, I got to tell you, I'm fading on both of those Niners wide receivers until I see how they look on the field. I'm not, again, if you're putting together a couple of DraftKings contests, you take a flyer, Ayuk's $4,300, go for it, right? You do that. But for season long, do I want to trust my week to Ayuk or Sanu? Not yet. I'll tell you this. I'll give you my guy who I really like. So let's say if you're in that situation, Ayuk, Debo. I got a tweet earlier at Andy MC81, the guy who had Debo and Michael Thomas, both. So he's hosed. I said, look at this guy, Russell Gage of the Falcons. He was owned in just 2% of Yahoo leagues coming into this week. You got to follow the target share. 12 targets, 9 catches, exactly the same amount, funny enough, as Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley in that same week for Matt Ryan. They're dishing it out. They're going to be in a shootout versus the Cowboys. That's a great matchup for a nice back and forth. Gage, all three of those receivers comfortably eclipsed the 100-yard mark. So while I still think Hayden Hurst at the tight end, who I love, we talked about him before, I think his upside's phenomenal. But, hey, you're looking Russell Gage, you're looking the third receiver's weight 12 times? I'm not overlooking that. If I'm in trouble, I'm going to the waiver wire. I'm getting myself some Russell Gage.
He's Andy McNamara. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at AndyMC81, Sportsnet National Fantasy Sports host, analyst, also NFL analyst up there at Sportsnet at AndyMC81 on Twitter. Andy, I do have a question on our text board from John. He wants me to ask you, do you start Gronk or Hooper this week?
Ooh, boy. Well, Hooper is the decision has to be made in hour and a half if you're going to pop him in. Okay, so here's the thing. We look at David Njoku was the one who got the touchdown last week for the Browns. So if he was still available, I'd be a little nervous about it. But he's not. He's on the IR. He's going to be out at least 3 games. Hooper, we just talked about, follow the money. I was shocked last week, like many, that an offense that Kevin Stefanski's running, which is supposed to be the offshoot of Gary Kubiak and the Shanahan offense, which heavily features running backs and tight ends, Austin Hooper got 2 looks. 2! That's crazy to me. That's got to increase. Whereas we look at Gronk, and it's okay. We know how familiar he is with Brady, right? But look what O.J. Howard did last week too. He was cutting in there. Gronk's fantasy points, guys: 2 catches, 3 targets, 11 yards. Is that going to go up? Maybe, probably. But the durability issues. If I'm looking season long, like, can I trust Gronk? I would think they'd be keeping him on a pitch count and try to get him to the playoffs. So I would say Austin Hooper. Is the upside greater on Gronk? Sure. If he can turn back the clock 1 week, yeah. But I'd say the path is clearer for Austin Hooper tonight against the Bengals based on the offense. The math is there, Josh. It might not. It is the Browns. It might not happen, but the math is there to point to that very well could happen, and I think a better chance of producing than with Gronk.
Let's stick with tonight's game, Thursday football. Folks, you can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. Browns versus Bengals, the Battle of Ohio. I got to know from you, I'm looking at this as a potential opportunity for people for fantasy just because of the fact, not because of all the names that will be out there like Burrow and Mayfield and OBJ and AJ Green, but also because of the fact that I know that the Browns have pretty much you and me playing in their secondary.
Oh, boy. Yeah, man. Listen, I'm wearing a Cleveland Brown shirt right now. I'm trying to give the good vibes up there, right? You got one guy with a lacerated liver because his teammates fell on him in training camp, banged up all over the place. Now, Ronnie Harrison should have a more expanded role this week, which I am excited about. I do like Ronnie Harrison. But overall, Greedy Williams, who's normally their number 2 corner beside Denzel Ward, he's missing another game with a shoulder. It's banged up. So the question's going to be, like, if I'm Cincinnati, I'm doing every sort of short dink and dunk pass opportunity so that Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, Larry Ogunjobi, and Sheldon Richardson, that front 4, cannot get to me. I'm not dropping back and throwing deep balls here. So if I'm thinking that way, because if I get the ball out of my hand, I got to deal with the depleted linebacker core and secondary. That's much more agreeable to me if I'm Cincinnati than trying to drop back and chuck one up downfield to Tyler Boyd and maybe Myles Garrett squashes me. So when we look at it from that angle there, I'm thinking, okay, who does that benefit? Well, I think AJ Green, right? Tyler Boyd I do love, and T. Higgins, I love them long-term. They didn't really do much in week 1, but it is also a rookie, and that's the question with the rookie quarterback. Do they get confused by different defenses? Burrow, we saw run a little bit. Does he do that? Does he do check down? I think the big winner of this game from the Bengals side fantasy-wise is going to be Joe Mixon. So, like, in our DraftKings, in the showdown contest where you pick, like, the captain, the 1.5 fantasy points based on the salary, I'm putting Joe Mixon in that slot because last year, in 2 combined games, he rushed for over 300 yards. I think they're going to look the way of Joe Mixon early. And if they do, whether it's season-long or DraftKings, you're going to get some nice payout.
It's funny you mention that because the number 1 prop bet on DraftKings Sportsbook tonight right now is the Joe Burrow over 23.5 rushing yards. So with that being said, does Joe Burrow get a little more value in fantasy, number 1, because he maybe runs the ball around a little bit, and number 2, would you take that over 23.5 rush yards?
Boy, the sportsbooks always know, right? They don't just how to put it in that spot that makes you think. I think I would. I think I would take that. That doesn't, that's he rushes 3 times on a design run or an escape, and he can get that. I'd say I'd take the over on the rushing yards. Yeah, that does add a little bit of fantasy value, especially if maybe he does one near the goal line, right? But now, if we start going down that road, does that limit your opinion on Joe Mixon? I still think both can do it. So I would say if I'm looking at the Bengals, I'm probably devaluing the receivers a bit. I think maybe A.J. Green, if you're going to pick one, probably the guy to go with there. But I'm going to really value Mixon. If I'm going to pick the quarterback, I hate to go against my guy Baker, but I probably put Burrow for the running aspect. And one other guy nobody's talking about, and this offense, Zach Taylor, if he can get away from his comfort zone doing the 3-4 wide set, the Browns are one of the worst teams, not just this year, but over several years, of covering tight ends. Put C.J. Uzoma in there. Okay, put him in. They threw to him 5 times last week. He caught 4, all short little things. I think Uzoma is going to be somebody you could put into your DFS, to your season long. It's a risk because this is just projection. But the path is there again, where the Browns are so bad covering the tight end, the linebacker core is so decimated. We could be hearing a lot of C.J. Uzoma, and if he gets a touchdown, maybe gets 4 or 5 catches, it's a pretty good little fantasy day.
Andy McNamara from Sportsnet joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. And it's a couple more Sunday games before I let you go. I want to know, we touched a little bit on the Colts earlier, but I want to know your thoughts, though, overall on this Vikings-Colts game. You got 2 teams that most people thought were going to win week 1. Neither one of them did, and you could argue that both of them were in some ways embarrassed week 1, and now they're both having to play in week 2. To me, this is one of the more fascinating games, whether it's regular football or fantasy football-wise, of NFL Week 2, because these are 2 teams that most people assumed were going to come in 1-0, and both of them put up duds in week 1.
That's right. At this point, if I'm looking at it, I'm going, and we'll go real football for a sec. I think I'm going to trust the Vikings more just because we go back to the COVID-shortened offseason with the virtual meetings, with not having enough time. We're trying to get into a groove. Kirk Cousins has been there. That's the same offense. Week 1 didn't go the way you wanted to, but at least you can carry on. And fantasy-wise as well, Kirk Cousins was, I think it was like a QB 14-15 last year. Not great fantasy-wise. He got almost 23 fantasy points last week. So my hope for this game, if we're looking at a fantasy, is we get into a little bit of a gunslinger battle, right? Maybe we know Phil Rivers, he ain't afraid to throw the ball. Might not be to the right team all the time, but he's not afraid to throw it. So if you can get into a little gamesmanship here, that could be a fun day for your fantasy team. You got to light up Dalvin Cook, obviously. The 2 running backs we talked about, Taylor and Hines, I think both are going to have a big day and a path to do it. Paris Campbell, and then obviously from Minnesota, outside of Dalvin Cook, it's pretty much Adam Thielen. About it. The tight ends, I don't like Rudolph and Smith Jr. because they sort of cannibalize each other at that position. They're split and nobody really separates. So those would be my fantasy looks for that game. But it's getting down to, it's not a must win, of course, until it's an elimination game. But those are some tough divisions those guys are in. So they gotta not fool around too much, and each one could really use the victory there.
Sunday Night Football here on 97.3 ESPN. Folks can hear it. The Patriots versus the Seahawks. These 2 teams won for completely different reasons last week. It was the Patriots and the run game. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the Seahawks, despite allow almost 500 total yards last week, they still won the game, and that's with Jamal Adams back there. So we know Bill Belichick, he adjusts from week to week. Could this be the game where Cam Newton goes to the air for the Patriots, realizing that that's how the Falcons got points against the Seahawks previously?
Well, it's going to be, I think, if Russell Wilson can have even close to the day. He was, by the way, folks, number 1 fantasy quarterback this past week. People don't talk enough. And it's funny, Bill Belichick said today, he's like, he didn't think Russell Wilson gets enough credit. Fantasy football, he doesn't get enough credit. He was the top guy, 4 touchdowns, 322. Now he had to throw it that much. Is this game flow going to go that route? And I honestly would like to see it a bit high scoring because I want to see where Cam is at throwing the ball. Right? He was efficient, but he didn't have to throw too much. You're right. It was all about the run. What if he's got to throw it? I know the shoulder's fixed, but how confident is he in it? What if he's back in the pocket, takes a couple of hits? What if he's running? Like, how much do you want to sacrifice Cam Newton's body? Takes a crunch hit, right? So I would like to see this game, this score, get up a little higher, and maybe the Seahawks out to an early lead just to see if Cam Newton can still sling it and what that looks like with the Patriots.
Also, the other thing with this game tonight, on Sunday night, is you have to wonder, are we going to see something different, not just from the Patriots? We always know something different from the Patriots. But are we going to see something different from the Seahawks? I mentioned earlier they were just letting the Falcons go up and down the field on them. And, you did acquire Jamal Adams for a reason, right? You acquired him to help you play defense, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's like they paid a top dollar, overpaid for Jamal Adams. Now, and that's the trouble when you pay for one defender that isn't a pass rusher, and even in that case. Now, Jamal Adams can roam. We know he's got a wide range, but you don't have to throw it to the guy who's around Jamal Adams, right? Like you can, it might limit your options, but if you find weaknesses elsewhere, you can exploit those, and it's up to Seattle to try to make those adjustments. Okay, didn't go well on this side. How do we maneuver around? That's a great point. How does that happen? And if the Patriots do try to run the ball, actually, the more I think of it, I think if Cam Newton and the Pats should come out throwing, I think running the ball would be what Seattle would prefer, right? Like just to be able to hone in and maybe tighten the box up a little bit there and not have it arrow. So maybe the Patriots think the same thing and go that route. We're going to see what Cam's made of right now.
He's Andy McNamara. Make sure you're following on Twitter at AndyMC81 for all your fantasy football advice. Also, all your NFL insights. We got Thursday Night Football tonight. We got NFL Sunday coming up, Monday Football. He joins us each and every week, and as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andy, always appreciate the time and the insights.
Oh, anytime. And guys, come on, do a little prayer for my Browns tonight. Come on, help me out. Let's go.
Hope for the best. That's what I'll say. Hope for the best.
Thanks,
Prepare for the worst.
We'll talk to you next week, bud.
He's Andy McNamara. Again, follow him at AndyMC81, Sportsnet National Fantasy Sports host, analyst, as well as NFL analyst for up there at Sportsnet. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Game Night being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. PlaceYourGals.com text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. We got more football to talk coming up next, as well as NBA playoffs going on tonight, Thursday Night Football, a lot of sports going on. It's a huge day. The U.S. Open was the first day today. So much going on. It's incredible. You can't do without it. It's amazing. But we don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app with all the content from 97.3ESPN.com. So you don't have to go pull up that browser on your phone to go check out the latest Eagles news and information about Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham. Now you can do it right there on the app.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
PlaceYourGals.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Got a little news for you on tonight's Thursday Night Football game. Zach Jackson, he covers the Browns in the NFL for The Athletic. He just put out there, he's at the Browns game watching pregame warm-ups. Cody Parkey, who just was signed to the Browns to be their new kicker, he just doinked one kick off the left upright from 37, and then he hit another doink from 46. The guy is hitting the goalpost in the pregame just like he did when the Eagles beat the Bears just a couple years ago. Some things never change. It's good to know that 2020 hasn't ruined all the fun. I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, the guy can't even make a field goal during pregame warm-ups. Wow. Again, Thursday football tonight. Bengals, Browns, the Battle of Ohio. You got Joe Burrow versus Baker Mayfield. You hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 8 p.m. Little other news that's just coming down the wire right now, and it kind of ties right into a conversation I wanted to have here on Game Night. Ohio State's Shaun Wade just announced on SportsCenter he is opting back into the 2020 college football season. So one of the best players in the country, a guy who's probably going to be a top 10 draft pick in the NFL draft 2021, is going to be on the field for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And it's just another thing that's happened this week that is just, it kind of has your head spinning when it comes to college football. Alone, other news that came out earlier today, the MAC, yes, they are going to come back too. The schools in MAC are going to play, and their championship game would be December 18th or 19th. They're going to follow the lead of the Big Ten. A lot of the schools in the MAC are also in Big Ten country. Schools like Ohio, for example, those schools are in this same kind of area as they are. So the MAC following in the footsteps of the Big Ten. And I was going to touch on this yesterday, but we ran out of time. Anyone who knows me knows I love college football. I am a huge college football fan my whole life. But this whole situation with the conferences that opted out and now they're opting back in, don't get it twisted. Don't overthink this. Don't give any praise or credit to anybody. The reason why the Big Ten is coming back isn't because people love football. It isn't because the president called the Big Ten commissioner to have a conversation. It's not because they found a way to medically okay the situation. It's because of money. These new rapid tests that have come out, whether it's Saliva Direct or any of the others that are now hitting the market, they are a fraction of the cost of the original COVID tests. The COVID tests that organizations like the NBA and the NHL and the UFC and NASCAR have been doing, and golf, the PGA Tour have been doing for months. Those tests, they have a new group of them. I think there's 2 or 3 of them now. I know about Saliva Direct is one specifically. There's another one the Pac-12 has signed on to an agreement to get their testing done. The Big Ten's going to have a similar deal done with a group as well. These new tests are way less expensive. So for you to do daily testing is now more economical than ever. This whole idea that they were so worried about the safety of the kids and health and all that stuff has always been a bunch of hogwash. The only reason why they cared about anybody's health is because they didn't want to get sued. All right? These presidents, these commissioners, they don't want to get a lawsuit. They don't really care about the health of the kids, especially considering that the report that came out of Penn State doctors was disputed by the Mayo Clinic. Nobody talks about that report. No, of course not. Now, the problem with the Big Ten is that they saw an opportunity to not lose a bunch of money, still make their TV money, still get those advertisers back on board, still make money off of the most profitable entity in their world, which is football. It was the University of Minnesota that was going to furlough the entire athletic department because there was no football. They had no money to pay some of those people. And now football's coming back. And now they're going to play starting at the end of October, and we're going to have a football season. They're going to have 8 weeks of football, and then they're going to be hoping to be qualified for the college football national championships. Football playoffs going to have probably Ohio State if they run the table because they're considered one of the best teams in the country. Sean Wade coming back is a big part of that. We know that Justin Fields was fighting and petitioning to play. And I'm happy for the kids who are going to play. And I love football, so I'm going to watch. But don't think for 1 minute that this has ever been about anything but money. They don't care about these kids. They don't care about anything else except for protecting their own assets. Yes, I said assets, okay? The financial and the litigation. Because as soon as there was a way for them to not have to worry about certain elements of this, they found a way to get football on the field. Conveniently. And now the MAC is following in their footsteps. Now, for those who are wondering why the Pac-12 isn't doing the same thing, the Pac-12 is in a very different situation because a huge chunk of that membership is dealing with the wildfires out west. We know that Seattle had to move the Mariners games to San Diego. We know there were threats of them not being able to play games in San Francisco last weekend because of the fires and the deterioration of the air. So there's a lot of places out in the Pacific that even if the Pac-12 wanted to come back right now, they just couldn't because of the wildfires, the condition of the environment out there. It's actually almost a blessing in disguise that half the world has a mask right now, because if you're going to walk around outside out there in places like California and Oregon right now because of the smoke out there, you're not going to walk around without a mask. Not just because of maybe COVID regulations and protocols, but because of the fact that the whole air is contaminated with this fire smoke. So don't think the Pac-12 is completely following or not following in the Big Ten's footsteps. I know there were reports that the Pac-12 and Big Ten had talked about possibly aligning their seasons so they could have a Rose Bowl still, because traditionally the Pac-12 versus the Big Ten is the Rose Bowl game, traditionally. But as I said, the big thing with college football is don't think for 1 minute that this isn't about one thing and one thing only. Doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy it. It doesn't mean you can't consume it, because I am, and I want to recommend you do as well. Because sports, for all of us, is a form of escaping the real world. And if you give these kids an opportunity to escape the real world for a few hours, and you give the rest of us watching an opportunity to escape the real world for a few hours, I'm all for it. Good news always is a good thing. But for as much as I love college football, I am not going to ignore the fact of how much there is an influence of money to be made here and money to be saved, less it isn't about for the purity of the game, for the love of the game. Because if it was for the purity, for the love of the game, they would have found a way. We all know that. There's going to be people out there who are going to try to use politics. They're going to try to use all kinds of different things to tell you otherwise. I'm going to tell you, anybody who tells you otherwise is full of a lot of hogwash, all right? They're full of a lot of baloney. It's always about money, and it was always about litigation, and it was always about protecting the rear, because it's not an accident that the ACC and the SEC and the Big 12 are playing. You're telling me that their doctors are stupid compared to the Big 10? Or is it that their doctors verified what we already know? That there is a level of risk for all of us doing certain things. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe somebody had to sign some paperwork for them to maybe play, or maybe there was some sort of hush-hush agreement that if something did happen, that they would handle it XYZ way. I don't know exactly. I'm just conjecturing. But whatever the reason is, for the Big 12 and the ACC and now the SEC to have football, and now the Big 10 and the MAC are coming around, we all know what it's really about. Coming up next, we have Spain and Fitz, followed by Thursday Night Football here on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you keep it tuned for that. I know Hunter Brody said earlier on the Sports Bash that he's going Bengals heavy. I don't know how heavy you want to go, Hunter, but I got a good feeling with the Bengals tonight. That line is looking a little bit dicey. I would take the Bengals on the spread, that's for sure, tonight. I mean, that Browns defense is, especially the secondary, just horrible. They got nobody back there. Don't forget, tomorrow on the Sports Bash of Football Friday, I'll be back on following the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody tomorrow at 6 for Game Night. Have a great night, everybody. Stay tuned for Thursday football.